Hey, I am Coach T, and in this object-oriented quick code video, we are going to be looking at how to define classes in Python. So if you watched my object-oriented programming intro from last week, you are set to begin working with me on developing and designing classes in Python. This is a crucial step in learning to build your own more complicated, interactive, rich software. But it does rely on you understanding things like passing arguments into parameters, on defining objects. So if you don't know how to define an object, you need to back up and watch last week's video and maybe consider reviewing my function videos as well, because we do go into the nitty gritty of defining objects via functions in those. Also, you need to understand what variables are, and you need to understand a little bit about data types, because we are no longer in the beginner realm of Python. We are moving out of the starter zone and into a more intermediate playing field. So it's going to get a little bit more complicated, but I remember being baffled by object oriented programming when I started working on it in the summer of 2024. And I remember really having to read outside of the resources that I had chosen to get a kind of rich, robust way of understanding it. But it's very, very powerful once you start to understand how it works. And object oriented design, to some extent, does totally undergird everything that we do in modern computing, at least as far as human computer interaction and controlling data flow, that kind of thing. So, object oriented programming is common to Python, JavaScript, C Sharp, C++, Java. I mean, basically every modern language. I don't want to talk too far outside my wheelhouse here, but if you understand object oriented programming in Python, it is very easy, speaking from personal experience, to pick up in C Sharp and even in Java, which is not a language that I have learned explicitly. But when I'm looking at my O'Reilly Headfirst data structures and object oriented design book, all of the examples are in Java. And because I get the objects from C Sharp and from Python, I can read and understand those examples in Java with no issues. So it is one of those areas where you might see it on the internet or on other videos all the time, but when you learn one programming language, the other ones are easier and easier and easier to pick up, because you're more worried about the minutia of syntax, which is predictable, rather than understanding whole new concepts. So as we go through these object-oriented videos in using classes and getting classes to interact and building some simple class-based software, be aware that if you do want to learn another language, you are laying the groundwork for success right now and here. So that's a little bit of a long-winded way to introduce what we're going to talk about in this video. But I do hope that it's useful, and I really hope that you walk away from this video feeling more comfortable talking about objects in Python. So with that said, if you do like this kind of head-first, practical, step-by-step approach to learning to build cool stuff with Python, I do encourage you to subscribe to my channel, to share this video with other learners, and hey, leave a comment encouraging another learner here down below, so I know that you were here, but also so we can spread some positivity, because what we're doing is not easy, but it is doable. So leave some encouragement for somebody else. All right, with that said, let's take a look at our classes overview. So in this video, we're going to introduce what a class is, how to define it, how to write one simple method, and then in the next video, we'll start to look at doing more complicated things. But I want to go really step by step here. So the big idea, the big takeaway, is that classes are objects that we define, which include some fields or variables, and methods, which are class-specific functions. Previous to this point, everything we've written that is a reusable component of code has been a function which exists in the main Python program body. But when we have a method, we have a different word, because we're talking about a class-specific method. So that function can only be called from within the class. I promise I will get to that, because that is a concept that threw me a little bit. Sometimes you'll see functions and methods referred to synonymously, but you should be aware that generally, if we mention a method, we're talking about a function within a class. So, and I have a typo here I don't like. Okay, so That's the big idea. Class is a more complicated structure that we define, and also I should add, can be instanced to create new objects like a blueprint. So this is the key takeaway concept. When you define a class, you're not creating a single object, you're creating a blueprint. And that blueprint can be used to produce an infinite number of instances of that class. So an instance is the actual object itself. Class is the blueprint. Instance is the object created from the blueprint. That's a key distinction that you need to work on. And I really encourage you to do this by practicing in the code. If you've watched my videos, you know I preach the Pareto principle. 80% of your time should be practicing, writing your own stuff, figuring out what works and what doesn't work. 20% of the time should be spent on research, watching videos, reading, trying to do that kind of thing. Really, this is going to require practice. Object-oriented theory, not that complicated. Object-oriented application, quite complicated. So, again, one last time, third time's the charm, right? Your class is an object blueprint that you define, which can include fields or variables, and methods, which are that class-specific function, and they can be instanced to create new independent objects of that class type. All right. Let's look at the syntax that we need to create our class. I'm going to just shrink this and get this out of the way. I don't want to focus on it right now. I want to focus on this. So our class is, the blueprint is defined by using the class keyword right here, lowercase class, and then the title of your class. And here's where I would recommend following the, was it called PEP 8? The Python formatting recommendations of using Pascal case to define classes. So that means capital on the beginning of each word. So my class, that means every instance of this class will have to reference my class formatted like that. And this keys Python into saying, oh, hey, he's about to create an object of the following type. So that's how we initialize the class, right? Class, my class. And this could be anything. It could be class person, which actually we will leave this as class person for the duration of the video. Then we have a new concept. This is called the dunder init, or double underline init. So you can see it's called dunder because we go 1, 2, double underline, or double underscore rather. Dunder init. This is very important. You cannot get away without using dunder init because this tells Python what are the bare minimums that I need to pass in to set up the class. At the absolute minimum, you need self. Self then refers to the current instance of the object. That is something I really struggled with when I was learning Pygame and I was building my first couple projects. But you always need the self nomenclature when you're setting up your class. Now, I don't necessarily need the self when I'm doing this. I can have it, right? Travis or Coach T. I can do self.name, and what that specifies to the machine is that this, whatever this field or property is specific to this one instance. So there's no confusion. So I'd recommend, especially when you're starting, get used to using the self.name. Now in C#, we have some commands like this. We use properties rather than fields here, but this can be a little bit of a problem because we're saying name equals name. If you're going to have fields in your class, you do want it to have a different name that's being assigned into it. That's a clumsy way of explaining this. But if I'm passing this variable in as a parameter, it's down here. I'm saying this field is now equal to name. This variable or class field is equal to whatever I have passed in. The self.name nomenclature lets me get around any confusion that could be caused there if I keep them the same, but generally it's recommended capitalize that field, right? Okay, now here's what will happen. Let's walk through this. Step one, we declare the class, right? That is the class person. Step two, Python then looks at the dunder init to see how to assign variables or arguments, passed into the declaration. 3, Python then instances the object. That's not exactly what's going on, but it's good enough for beginners to understand the steps of what's happening. So here is how we actually initialize the class. We would say we'll do person equals person. We don't need to type self here. That's only in the initializer. But we do need to give self or person a name. So we'll do coach T, right? So this declaration of person says create a new object of the person class. Then Python goes, okay, what are they giving me to set this up in the initializer? It's going to call this function immediately upon the creation. It goes, all right, so we're initializing it. What do we need? All right, we're going to create a reference back to myself so I don't get lost in case there are more than one of me. What did they pass in after that? After self, which must go first, then this variable is whatever the next one is, coach T. If I were to do 2, I would throw an error for myself when I try to run this because it has nowhere to pass that to. I don't have a field for it. So coach T, and then it's going to go, okay, cool. That name is now equal to self.name. And I can check that by going print person.name. So let me comment out everything else so I don't cause errors. And we will print this bad boy and see if I get my name, Coach T. So what I printed was the variable assigned to self.name, right? That is the real brass tacks basics of declaring a class, passing in arguments to create it, and then doing something with that data. What I want to do, and we're going a little bit long here, what I want to do before we go any farther is I want to define one simple class function with you. I just need to figure out what's going on here. Unindent does not amount. Okay. White space in Python is frustrating. Okay, so now we have a very, very simple function. All that is going to happen is we are going to define greet as the name of the function, and I'm going to capitalize that for PEP 8 compliance. And then we're going to pass a reference to self. You can see the parameter here is self at person. So whatever the class this thing is, we need self here. Otherwise it gets goofy, right? We need self. Let me see one thing, because I've learned a little bit more in my own time. Yeah, it can't do it. So in Python, you need self here, right? This defines the greet method, and all that will happen is when I call person.greet, and I use the parentheses to mark it out as a function rather than a field reference, then it's going to say hello self, whatever the value is stored in self.name. So let's declare a new person instance. We'll do Buck Rogers. Why did that come to mind? Now we have an instance of class person, and let's do Buck. Buck equals Buck Rogers. Sure thing. All right, now we're going to say buck.greet. We don't have to pass anything in, and what will happen is when we run this code, Buck is going to store an object of the person class as defined above, it's going to pass in Buck Rogers as the name, and then we're going to call the default method on Buck, and it's going to print off hello Buck's name. So we'll run that real quick, and then we'll wrap this video up because that was a lot. Hello Buck Rogers, right? Very elementary, but you might be able to take this in practice and start to come up with your own fields or your own methods within this to do something new. So what if I leave you a little challenge here? I want you to come up with a method to say goodbye, and I also want you to come up with a variable that stores a job, right? What is the job that this individual has? And build off of that, right? Come up with a method that references the job somehow. I don't care what that looks like. So there is your takeaway, because you really need to practice the object-oriented design. It's not something you can only listen to. You need to actually practice with it. And since we're at 16 minutes, hell, why not go to 20? I'm going to do a count to 3, and then I will show you how to do these methods too. But pause me and go do it on your own. You've got to practice. You've got to slow down and practice. So I will show you, though, because I don't want to leave you hanging going, well, all right, I hit a brick wall. So 3, 2, 1, let's do it. So we need self.job. And this is currently not referenced, so we could do this one of two ways. We could say adventurer, and that would work. That won't cause any errors. We could also pass that in here, job, right? So I think I prefer to do this way, because otherwise every single class person would be an adventurer. I don't really want that. But now I do need to adjust this, and I need to say adventurer. So now I've got two arguments passing arguments in. So when I declare Buck, he'll become Buck Rogers. And you know what? Yeah, that's fine. And then also he's got his job. I think Buck Rogers was a sci-fi superhero, super character. I have no idea why this came to mind. I don't know. Could be related to the fact that I've been talking for like an hour recording these videos back to back. Might be that I didn't have enough coffee. But anyway, so we have two fields. We need another method, right? So we need to take care of this one. So we will define adios. I'm feeling it. Self print adios self.name. There we go. That solves this one. And then we also need a method that references the job somehow. Def job description self print self.name is an self.job. I think that'll work. I gotta test it to see for sure. But we're concatenating together a longer string of name is an and then adventure. Self.job, which is adventurer. So let's do buck.greet, buck.adios, buck.job description. And let's see what we get when we print it off. There we go. Okay, so we got adios Buck Rogers. Buck Rogers is an adventurer. So we are properly and efficiently accessing our fields, our class variables, and we are also writing methods now that pass basic information around to define a more structured class. So cool. Go practice. Go write out a couple classes. Go do pizzas and trucks and your favorite video game character. Come up with some simple classes that store basic information on them. And with that said, I am happy to have started working on classes with you. This stuff is, I hope you can get from my energy, exciting to me. It's empowering to be able to write your own software that does cool new stuff. And I will be back with you next week. We're going to look more at defining functions. We're going to define a more complicated class. And then we're also going to start to look at some more object-oriented design principles. So that said, I am Coach T. I know we are out of beginner land. I'm glad that you're with me. I will see you next week.